Should I house my snakes together? What happens when you put two lizards in a box? Oh, that goanna just bit the other goanna. Will it be okay? I wonder how that'll go. Hey guys, welcome back to another video here. And in this video, we're going to be talking about cohabiting reptiles. So that's right guys, in this video we're going to be talking about putting two animals in a box and talking about the potential outcomes. So first things first, I will preface that this video is my opinion. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, and this is one of those things that a lot of people say yes, a lot of people say no. This is just what I do and what I've experienced during it. So the biggest thing that I want to say before I get into it is anytime you put two animals in a box, it's a risk. It's a big risk and you kind of have to know what you're going in for. And you've got to be prepared for good and bad outcomes. So if you're a long-time viewer of my channel, you'll know that I do a lot of cohabiting, and it comes down to a few reasons. Not just space, but it also comes down to the fact that I'm a lazy breeder and I tend to miss a lot of cues, and it's kind of easier for me to have some success if I put two animals together and leave them there. That being said, I don't do it for everything, and there are some species that tend to do it better than others. Take a Gurnia for example. These guys are a variety of skinks in Australia, and they are generally in family groups when they're found in the wild. I've only got two Gurnia here, and I actually only have two individuals, and it's not because I only want individuals, it's just that's the way the cookie crumbled and I've only got individuals. I would like to have more of those Gurnia in a family group if the space allowed it, but that being said, I just don't happen to have that happening for me right now, and that's fine. But I've got plenty of other animals that generally will be solo in the wild that are in groups. First thing I'll say is pretty much all of my geckos that I've got here, they're all in pairs or if not groups. More often than not, most gecko species actually tend to be pretty good with each other. There will be exceptions though, you know, sometimes, and this goes for most animals to be honest, when you've got them in a box together, is there will be a lot of squabbling over food. So something you have to be kind of conscious of is making sure that everybody's getting adequate food. For me personally, I tend to do a lot of tongue feeding, or what I do is I might kind of put a ton of food in the enclosure and just let them go foraging. And then that way kind of nobody misses out. So even if there is kind of like a dominant animal, they'll fill up quickly and then there'll still be food left over for the other guys that are in the tank. This of course doesn't always work, but there's always an exception to what does and doesn't work. Where possible, the reason that I tongue feed is because I want to make sure that animals are definitely getting adequate feed. But yeah, as I said, that doesn't always work. So sometimes just putting a whole bunch of woodies or crickets into an enclosure is just easier, and making sure that you sit back and watch them actually eat. Some geckos that can be renowned for being absolute savages are the Oedura complex. I had northern velvet geckos that would quite often fight together. You would see some scrapping and stuff there. Generally it was over food or you know, an animal would misjudge another animal thinking it was food running past. I've actually been very lucky with my Fimbria to know that they are pretty timid with one another. And they're also great eaters, so, you know, I don't really have any stress there. Other geckos that can actually be pretty savage with each other are things like cave geckos and ringtail geckos. Those guys are pretty much well renowned for you just house them separately, otherwise you'll probably end up losing a gecko. Other animals that I house together are pretty much all my dwarf monitors. They are all housed together or in small groups or pairs or however you want to call it. Again, it comes back to feed time being generally the worst kind of time. Sometimes there might be a little bit of aggression here and there. Most of what I've experienced has been pretty mild, so I haven't had an issue with it yet. That's the key word, yet. I'm expecting that at some point it will crop up, and you've got to be prepared for that when you're putting animals in the same box. You've got to think about it like this. If you and I were locked in a room together, we'd probably fight together after a while. Man, my Boyd's forest dragons, like those guys are housed together, but the female is an absolute savage on feed. If you got anything that resembles food near you, she will definitely come running down and be an absolute pig. Whereas the male is quite happy to sit back and just try to take food as he can get it. So that's something that I have to be super conscious about, is making sure that he's getting enough food. So generally I feed her right up, make sure she's kind of stumped, and then all of a sudden I'll go in and just make sure that he's getting a whole bunch of tucker after that. So some of my pythons I house together full time. and that comes with a massive pro and con as well. And some of them I don't house together full time, and that also comes with pros and cons. So my adult male and female green tree python, they're housed separately. But come this time of year, being in April, I've shut off food for the year for them. I'm going to lock them in the same box for about the next 6 months and see if we can get some breeding action and hopefully some eggs. And that comes down to the fact that I am trying to breed the animals. I do want to put them together out of their separate enclosures and give breeding a crack. And I know that I'm definitely going to miss cues because I'm just way too busy. So if I do it now, I kind of cover my chances at hopefully getting some eggs by the end of the year. But that being said, I do house their juveniles together. So I've got 2 pairs of green tree pythons here that are housed together. And it does come down to feed time as well. You can see a kind of recurring theme here, right? So sometimes when I'm actually feeding these animals, I have to be conscious about where they are in relation to each other and how quick they're finishing their meals, because if they can smell that old mate's got a mouse up the tree there, they will go searching for it even if they're still hungry after they've already eaten their own mouse. So something I try to be very wary of is making sure that when I do feed them, they're perched on like opposite sides of the tank, so there's kind of a little bit more time before they can potentially get to each other. And I will make sure that I've got the time to sit back, watch them eat, make sure that they're okay with each other afterwards. Something that you can do though, is what I do with my rough scale pythons, for example, who are also housed together, is when I do go to feed them, I pull one of the individuals out and actually tub feed them. I'm not a tub feeding kind of guy. That's never been my jam. I don't personally believe in it. That's okay if you do. I don't have an issue with you if you do. That's just not me. But this is one time that I do tub feed, and I'll leave one in the enclosure and I'll take one out and put it in a tub, feed them separately, pretty much leave them for a couple of hours and then put them back together. The reason for it is much like any of my snakes that have been housed together and I've tried to feed together, is this food aggression. So all of a sudden I have seen them wrapped up around each other with teeth in each other. It's not pretty, it's not what you want. Your heart sinks, you're worried about your animals, you're blaming yourself because you've just made a horribly stupid mistake. So this is why I'm kind of trying to make these videos go, don't do what I did. Try to do as I do now and separate things if you are going to feed them and if you are going to cohab them together. There's also interspecies cohabbing as well, which I have done a couple of times now and I do find it quite interesting. Take my lizards outdoors, for example. I've got a blotched blue tongue skink out there that's housed with a Cunningham skink. From what I can see, and it is what I can see, they get on together fine. They're never squabbling over food. The craziest thing that might happen is they might want to sit on the same log together and one pushes the other one off. That's what I've seen, but I'm not standing over them 24 hours a day, so there could be something going on there. But as far as what I can tell with the animal's health and what they look like and how they react to each other when I do see them, they do seem fine together. Another one that I did recently as well is I actually housed a central bearded dragon with my new shingleback acorn, and they actually got together pretty well. I was actually surprised at how well they adjusted to each other, because my bearded dragon's been alone for 10 years and I was not expecting it to go so smoothly. That being said, they are separate now. He's in an enclosure behind me here and the shingleback's down in this enclosure here. And there's no particular reason that I did that apart from the enclosures suit the individual species better. You know, central bearded dragon likes climbing. He can do that in a tall terrarium like this. I don't particularly want the shingleback climbing up a branch to try to get some UV and heat. That lower enclosure suited the shingleback a lot more. It's also got more floor space, so it's a bit of a longer run for the shingleback. That was really cool to see them together though. It was cool to see them kind of eating veggies out of the same bowl and, you know, just hanging out together. And yeah, it was kind of cool to see those two arid species come together, especially after coming back from a Western New South Wales trip and seeing them both in the wild. So one thing I do want to talk about as well is some pretty cool stuff that you can see when they are actually cohabbing together. Take my monitors for example, you can actually see some pretty natural behaviours when they're actually cohab together. I have witnessed a whole bunch of mating behaviour with them, the way that they kind of interact with each other around different seasons, around food, around territory inside of an enclosure. You know, certain animals might have certain branches and stuff that they find interesting. The pygmy mulga monitors, the gill and eye, you know, you can see them scent marking on different branches that they were trying to kind of claim as their own now, doing these kind of scenting tail wiggles and things. I do find that pretty interesting. Now, if you had an individual animal, you're probably not seeing that sort of same thing because essentially they got no reason to. So it is pretty kind of cool to see those sorts of interactions together. I love watching my pygmy mulgas go through kind of like courtship and things like that. This year I'm actually housing two males together for a period of time, and I am keeping a close eye on this. to see if there's any sort of like little wrestles and stuff like that go on. Does that stimulate more breeding? You know, does it improve sperm quality or something like that? It's just kind of stuff that I'm kind of toying with. So again, it's all risks, right? So weigh up the pros and cons personally. It's awesome during the cool season too to be able to put your snakes together and actually see them interact together, go through the stages of mating and ovulation and such like that. It is one thing that I am really looking forward to this year, because it's been a couple of years now since breeding my green tree pythons, is being a little bit more on the ball and seeing these guys come together. I absolutely can't wait. So that's basically what I wanted to talk about, guys, is to make sure that, you know, the animals, if you are cohabiting animals, have adequate space so they've got their own area that they can go to. Yeah, so being able to have like multiple hides absolutely everywhere to make sure that the animals have somewhere that they're actually able to go feel secure themselves, away from another animal if needed. You know, make sure that they are actually getting enough food, enough water, everything they do actually need, and keep an eye on them. Make sure you're looking out for them and make sure that you can actually see things. Like, the last thing you want to do is not notice something and something's gone wrong with an animal. It does happen, unfortunately. Like, that's the sensitive nature of animal keeping. Things do happen, and they are a higher risk if you are keeping multiple animals together in an enclosure. So I hope you enjoyed this video, guys. It was one that I had a question. I've just been flooded with questions recently about putting animals together, so I thought I might just have a little bit of a rant on cohabiting animals and see what everybody else thinks. And, you know, put your pros and cons down in the comments below. I'd love to hear everybody else's experiences out there. Obviously, there's going to be positives and there's going to be negatives, so I'd love to hear from you. Put something down there if you did want to share. So guys, before I do wrap up this video, make sure you go and check out Teespring, get yourself some merch. If you did want to support the channel even further, you can go and check me out on Patreon as well and get early access videos and a bit of extra content. There is also a tier over there that gets Patreon only videos from time to time as well. So until next time, guys, take it easy, and I'll catch you on the next video.